The Romantic Poets, Part 1, William Wordsworth and St. Coleridge. Hello, and welcome to this deep dive into the architects of the Romantic Age. This movement was a profound shift in cultural thought, moving away from Enlightenment rationalism to embrace emotion, imagination, and the power of nature. Today, we focus on the two foundational poets who co-authored the revolutionary lyrical ballads, William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. This is part I of our study of the Romantic poets. William Wordsworth, the father of Romanticism. William Wordsworth lived from 1770 to 1850. His profound influence earned him the title Father of Romanticism. Life and time. A cornerstone of his career was the co-authorship of lyrical ballads in 1798 with Coleridge. He also achieved the high honor of being named Poet Laureate later in life. His central themes are nature, childhood, and memory. Major works. Wordsworth's major works are central to the Romantic canon. Lyrical ballads, simple, emotional poetry. The Prelude, focuses on the growth of the poet's mind. Tintern Abbey, explores nature and memory. Ode, intimations of immortality, dedicated to the childhood vision. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, the famous poem about daffodils. Lucy Poems, poems centered on love and loss. Unique style. Wordsworth's unique style revolutionized poetic language and subject matter. He viewed nature as a moral guide. He championed simple language. His poetry often captures childhood innocence. He prioritized memory and reflection. He expressed a pantheistic reverence for the natural world. Famous lines. Wordsworth's verse gifted us some of literature's most enduring maxims. The child is father of the man. My heart leaps up. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Tintern Abbey. Bliss was it in that dawn, the prelude. My heart leaps up, my heart leaps up. The still, sad music of humanity. Tintern Abbey. A poet is a man speaking to men. Preface to lyrical ballads. The best portion of a good man's life, Tintern Abbey. Our birth is but a sleep, Intimations Ode. Thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. Intimations Ode. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, Daffodils. Next let us move on to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the supernatural visionary. Coleridge lived from 1772 to 1834 and was a key co-founder of Romanticism. While Wordsworth focused on the familiar, Coleridge was drawn to the mysterious and internal world. Life and time. Coleridge's life was marked by supernatural and philosophical interests, but also by personal struggles with illness and addiction. Major works. Coleridge's major works are characterized by their intense imaginative power. Kubla Khan, a poem derived from a dream vision. Rime of the Ancient Mariner, a powerful story of sin and redemption. Christable, a suspenseful Gothic mystery. Biographia Literaria, a major work of literary criticism. Dejection, an ode, explores themes of emotional decline. Unique style. Coleridge's distinctive style is known as supernatural romanticism. Key elements include the heavy use of dream imagery, the creation of a Gothic atmosphere, his belief in imagination as creative power, a persistent examination of guilt and redemption. Famous lines. Coleridge's lines are among the most evocative in the English language. Water, water everywhere, ancient mariner. He perth best, who loveth best, ancient mariner. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan, Kubla Khan. A sadder and a wiser man, ancient mariner. Alone, alone, all alone, ancient mariner. Life is but a dream. Kubla Khan, theme. The night is chill, the forest bare, Christable. My genial spirits fail, Dejection Ode. We receive but what we give. Dejection Ode. The dead were bodies till they felt, ancient mariner. Conclusion, a unified beginning. Wordsworth and Coleridge, through their complementary genius, laid the entire groundwork for the Romantic movement. Wordsworth provided the democratic voice and the focus on nature's moral truth, while Coleridge introduced the philosophical depth and the exploration of the dark, creative power of the imagination. Together, they form the essential starting point for understanding this rich literary era.
Let us start with questions on William Wordsworth. Q. No question answer supporting detail. 1. In which year was Lyrical Ballads first published? 1798 Beginning of the Romantic movement. 2. Who co-authored Lyrical Ballads with Wordsworth? St. Coleridge contributed the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. 3. Which poem contains the line "The child is father of the man"? My heart leaps up belief in continuity of childhood. 4. What is the central theme of Tintern Abbey? Memory and nature meditates on restorative memory. 5. Which poem begins with "I wandered lonely as a cloud"? Daffodils inspired by daffodils near Ullswater. 6. The Lucy poems belong to which category? Lyrical Ballads group 5 poems on an idealized young woman. 7. Which poem is Wordsworth's autobiographical epic? The Prelude spiritual autobiography. 8. Which concept defines Wordsworth's poetry? Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings romantic principle. 9. Where does poetry takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility appear? Preface to Lyrical Ballads explains his poetic process. 10. Whom does he address in Tintern Abbey? Dorothy. She inherits his love of nature. 11. Which poem states nature never did betray the heart that loved her? Tintern Abbey. Faith in nature's moral power. 12. Which poem longs for childhood imaginative glory? Intimations Ode describes fading glory. 13. Which poem centers on a reaper singing? The Solitary Reaper Highland Lass singing. 14. What does Lucy symbolize? Nature/spirit purity and mortality. 15. A violet by a mossy stone refers to whom? Lucy from She dwelt among the untrodden ways. 16. Which poem praises a leech gatherer? Resolution and independence symbol of perseverance. 17. When was Wordsworth named Poet Laureate? 1843 after Southey. 18. Which poem includes the line about a rainbow? My heart leaps up emotional response to nature. 19. Which river appears in Tintern Abbey? Why setting of poem. 20. Which poem features Shepherd Michael? Michael pastoral narrative. 21. The excursion is part of which larger project? The Recluse unfinished philosophical work. 22. Which text outlines Wordsworth's poetic aims? Preface to Lyrical Ballads defines romantic poetry. 23. Best portion of a good man's life is in which poem? Tintern Abbey celebrates kindness. 24. Central character of the ruined cottage? Margaret. Her suffering anchors narrative. 25. Which poem opens with "There was a boy"? There was a boy of Winander. 26. Central feature of Wordsworth's poetic diction? Simplicity rejects artificial style. 27. Which poem depicts a girl singing in fields? The Solitary Reaper song transcends language. 28. A host of golden daffodils refers to what? Daffodils seen nature's beauty. 29. What are spots of time? Memory moments shape development. 30. Who is the wanderer in the excursion? A wise guide represents philosophical ideal. 31. Which poem laments England's moral decline? London, 1802 calls on Milton. 32. Which poem contains Milton? Thou shouldst be living at this hour? London, 1802 critique of modern corruption. 33. Where does Wordsworth express his excitement for revolution? Prelude Books 9x depicts initial enthusiasm. 34. Which poem describes rustic Scottish life? The Blind Highland Boy explores hardship. 35. What meter dominates Wordsworth? Iambic pentameter standard English verse. 36. Where was Wordsworth born? Cockermouth in Lake District. 37. Which group was Wordsworth part of? Lake Poets with Coleridge and Southey. 38. Which poem highlights war's impact on a woman? The Female Vagrant focuses suffering. 39 Whose journals influenced many poems? Dorothy Wordsworth. Daffodils entry. 40 Which device makes daffodils dance? Personification. Flowers appear lively. 41 Lucy symbolizes what? Nature and mortality. Idealized spirit. 42 Which poem compares Lucy to a star? She dwelt among the untrodden ways, fair as a star. 43 Main theme of Intimations ode? Loss of childhood vision. Shades of the prison house. 44 Which poem contrasts innocence with social cruelty? The Idiot Boy. Sympathetic portrayal. 45 Who is Johnny in Wordsworth's poetry? The Idiot Boy. Compassionate character. 46 Children are closest to what, in Wordsworth's view? The Divine Intimations ode. Belief. 47 Which poem narrates a girl's disappearance? Lucy Gray. Ballad of Innocence. 48 Which poem includes You Yet May Spy the Fawn at Play? Lucy Gray. Nature imagery. 49 Central figure in the Brothers? Leonard's brother. Theme of guilt. 50 Which poem portrays snowstorm hardship? Guilt and Sorrow. Early radical poem. 51 What lesson does the leech gatherer teach? Endurance uplifts narrator. 52 Which natural symbol appears in the rainbow? A rainbow. Symbol of childhood. 53 Which poem critiques modern materialism? The world is too much with us. Condemns industrial values. 54 Which myth figures appear in The world is too much with us? Proteus and Triton. Classical references. 55 Which line begins Little we see in nature that is ours? The world is too much with us. Reflection on alienation. 56 Which poem presents a distressed mother? The Mad Mother. Depicts maternal pain. 57 Which book of the Prelude discusses childhood learning? Book v. Nature as Teacher. 58 Who was Mary Hutchinson? Wordsworth's wife. Childhood friend. 59 Which poem calls nature the anchor of my purest thoughts? Tintern Abbey. Nature as moral force. 60 Highland Lass appears in which poem? The Solitary Reaper. Mysterious song. 61 What does the skylark symbolize for Wordsworth? Spontaneous joy. Calmer than Shelley's version. 62 Which bird poem by Wordsworth differs from Shelley's? To the Skylark. Gentle reflection. 63 Which poem includes our meddling intellect misshapes? The tables turned. Critique of rationalism. 64 Which poem begins books? 'Tis a dull and endless strife. The tables turned. Calls for outdoor learning. 65 Companion poem to The Tables Turned? Expostulation and reply. Debates nature vs books. 66 Who is Matthew in Wordsworth's poems? A schoolmaster. Appears in several poems. 67 Which poem ends with belief in nature's loyalty? Tintern Abbey. Assurance to Dorothy. 68 Name of the ruined structure in Michael? Sheepfold. Symbol of broken hopes. 69 Which poem praises a Highland girl? The Highland Girl. Romantic admiration. 70 Who narrates the prelude? Wordsworth. Autobiographical. 71 What frightens the boy in boat stealing episode? Huge mountain peak. Nature's sublimity. 72 What activity appears in prelude's skating episode? Ice skating. Childhood joy. 73 Which poem urges quitting books for nature? The tables turned. Up, my friend. 74 Which poem contrasts nature with human cruelty? Lines written in early spring reflects harmony vs injustice. 75 Rustic damsel refers to which character? The Solitary Reaper. Her song moves the poet. 76 Which poem depicts London's morning beauty? Westminster Bridge celebrates calm. 77 Which famous line opens Westminster Bridge? Earth has not anything to show more fair praise of city's stillness. 78 Luke is whose son in Michael? Michael's tragic narrative. 79 Which poem features a blind child? The blind Highland boy shows vulnerability. 80 Theme of Ode to Duty? Moral responsibility contrasts emotion. 81 Which Wordsworth drama involves guilt? The Borderers explores moral conflict. 82 Which poem calls duty stern daughter of the voice of God? Ode to Duty opening invocation. 83 What causes despair in resolution and independence? Fear of future leech-gatherer consuls. 84 Where does Wordsworth reveal political retreat? The Prelude Disillusionment. 85 Who is Martha Ray? Character in the thorn. Her suffering dominates plot. 86 What symbol recurs in the thorn? Thorn bush represents grief. 87 Which poem shows a woman mad with grief? The Mad Mother. Maternal suffering. 88 Which poem describes nature's harmony? Lines written in early spring contrasts human cruelty. 89 Which poem depicts a discharged soldier? The Discharged Soldier. Human suffering. 90 Who speaks in the Pet Lamb? A little girl child's perspective. 91 What does the pet lamb symbolize? Innocence, childlike purity. 92 Who is the solitary in the excursion? Philosophical figure, deep thinker. 93 Which poem supports charity to the poor? The Old Cumberland Beggar. Moral sympathy. 94 Which river appears in Prelude? Childhood scenes. Derwent. Birthplace imagery. 95 Which poem contrasts calm with misery? Guilt and Sorrow. Early radical vision. 96 Which poem features girl sporting with the butterflies? We Are Seven. Child's innocence. 97 What lesson does We Are Seven teach? Acceptance of death. Child's view differs from adult. 98 Which poem includes the budding twigs spread out their fan? Lines written in early spring. Nature imagery. 99 What emotion dominates a slumber? Did my spirit seal? Numb grief. Lucy's death. 100 Which poem ends with rolled round in earth's diurnal course? A slumber. Did my spirit seal? Suggests Lucy's return to nature. 100 Objective questions on Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Set A. Q. No question answer supporting detail. 1. In which year was Coleridge born? 1772. Birth year of the Romantic poet. 2. Which poem begins with In Xanadu did Kubla Khan? Kubla Khan. His famous dream vision poem. 3. Which major work is an unfinished fragment? Kubla Khan interrupted by the person from Porlock. 4. Which poem includes water, water everywhere? The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Famous refrain. 5. Who shoots the albatross? The mariner. Central act causing the curse. 6. Which collection did he co-author with Wordsworth? Lyrical Ballads. Landmark romantic text. 7. Which long supernatural ballad did he contribute? The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Major LB contribution. 8. Who coined willing suspension of disbelief? Coleridge. Supernatural poetry. 9. Genre of Christabel. Gothic narrative poem known for eerie atmosphere. 10. Which meter is associated with Christabel? Christabel meter. Irregular accentual meter. 11. Who is Geraldine? A mysterious woman. Supernatural figure in Christabel. 12. Which poem laments loss of creative power? Dejection, an ode autobiographical crisis. 13. Which work critiques Wordsworth? Biographia Literaria. His major critical text. 14. Which poem includes a sunny pleasure dome? Kubla Khan's striking imagery. 15. Symbol of guilt in Ancient Mariner. The albatross hung around mariner's neck. 16. Which creatures become beautiful when blessed? Water snakes. Mark's turning point. 17. Narrative frame of Ancient Mariner. Wedding guest. Framing mariner stops a guest. 18. Who appears on ghost ship? Death and life in death dice for mariner's fate. 19. Who wins the dice game? Life in death claims the mariner. 20. Which poem ends with a sadder and a wiser man? Ancient Mariner. Wedding guest's lesson. 21. Which poem addresses Sarah Hutchinson? The Aeolian Harp. Meditation on imagination. 22. Symbolic instrument in the Aeolian harp. Aeolian harp represents creative inspiration. 23. Addressee of the Aeolian harp. Sarah Hutchinson. Coleridge's beloved. 24. Poem expressing guilt and inner conflict. Dejection, an ode confessional tone. 25. Setting of hymn before sunrise. Vale of Camounty. Alpine landscape. 26. Mountain praised in hymn before sunrise. Mont Blanc symbol of sublimity. 27 Which poem contains a wedding guest? Ancient Mariner repeated address. 28 Meter of Ancient Mariner. Ballad meter alternating tetrameter/trimeter. 29 Where is theory of imagination explained? Biographia literaria primary and secondary imagination. 30 Primary imagination refers to living power of human perception, universal creative force. 31 Secondary imagination refers to echo of primary imagination, conscious artistic shaping. 32 Which poem fears loss of emotional vitality? Dejection, an ode sense of inner deadness. 33 Which drug shaped Coleridge's visions? Opium affected many works. 34 Demon lover motif appears in Christabel ambiguous seduction. 35 Who was Coleridge's closest poetic partner? Wordsworth lake poet companion. 36 Which poem depicts a sea storm? Ancient Mariner dramatic sea imagery. 37 Who absolves the mariner near the end? The hermit listens to confession. 38 Which poem is based on a dream? Kubla-Khan dream fragment. 39 What river flows through Kubla-Khan? River Alf sacred river. 40 Who plays dulcimer in Kubla-Khan? Abyssinian made visionary figure. 41 Which poem displays guilt over domestic duty? The Aeolian harp self-reproach at end. 42 Name of Coleridge's wife? Sarah Fricker, married in 1795. 43 Which poem celebrates domestic calm? Frost at Midnight quiet reflection. 44 Addressee in Frost at Midnight? Hardly Coleridge, his infant son. 45 What opposes Wordsworth's naturalism? Coleridge's supernaturalism, twin poles of Romanticism. 46 Which text discusses German philosophy? Biographia literaria influenced by Kant and Schelling. 47 Secret Ministry of Frost appears in Frost at Midnight, Frost personified. 48 Symbol of imagination in Frost at Midnight? The film of flame triggers memory. 49 Which poem imitates medieval ballad tone? Christabel archaic diction. 50 Effect Geraldine casts on Christabel? A weakening spell, supernatural control. 51 Which poem features a spectral ship? Ancient Mariner ghostly vessel. 52 Which poem mixes dialogue and meditation? The Aeolian harp colloquy form. 53 Dominant form of dejection, an ode? Ode emotional introspection. 54 Romantic nature philosophy shown in Frost at Midnight, nature as moral guide. 55 Coleridge's key critical idea? Symbol vs allegory, symbol as organic. 56 Which poem hints at marriage tensions? The Aeolian harp alludes to conflict. 57 Narrative type of Ancient Mariner? Frame narrative, story within story. 58 Which poem has disembodied voices? Ancient Mariner spirits discussing fate. 59 What breaks mariner's curse? Blessing water snake's act of love. 60 Elfish light appears in Christabel supernatural atmosphere. 61 Which artists illustrated his poems? Various 19th century illustrators, popular editions. 62 Who influenced Coleridge's philosophy strongly? German idealists, notably Schelling. 63 Which poem shows sunny dome and caves of ice? Kubla-Khan imagistic contrast. 64 Which poem critiques rationalism? The Aeolian harp pantheistic drift. 65 Genre of hymn before sunrise? Hymn/ode religious awe. 66 Nature as healer shown in Frost at Midnight, nature shapes child's mind. 67 Which ode reflects marriage and creative crisis? Dejection, an ode emotional struggle. 68 Which poem features supernatural moaning? Ancient Mariner spirit voices. 69 Punishment faced by mariner's crew? Death by curse, supernatural retribution. 70 Who moves the dead sailors' bodies? Spirits operate the ship. 71 Which poem uses hypnotic rhythms? Christabel irregular charm. 72 Geraldine represents what? Masked evil, ambiguous supernatural threat. 73 Concept allowing belief in implausible events. Willing suspension of disbelief, reader's agreement. 74 Which poem parallels Wordsworth's child poems? Frost at Midnight, focus on child's future. 75 Where appears my genial spirits fail? Dejection, an ode despairing tone. 76 Coleridge's semi-autobiographical critical work? Biographia literaria, mix of theory and memoir. 77 Which poem uses spell-like diction? Christabel enhances Gothic tone. 78 Whose wedding is interrupted? Wedding guest's friend, guest detained by mariner. 79 Mariner's final moral lesson? Love all creatures, key message. 80 Which poem experiments with visionary horror? Ancient Mariner, supernatural terror. 81 Which poem describes blissful musical vision? Kubla Khan, Abyssinian Maid. 82 Which work blends autobiography and criticism? Biographia literaria, seminal critical work. 83 Which oils appears in? Ancient Mariner, sea imagery. 84 Which poem mentions mast high water? Ancient Mariner, ballad description. 85 Who comforts mariner at shore? Hermit, spiritual guide. 86 What destroys the ship at the end? Supernatural forces, ship sinks suddenly. 87 Which poem shows death fires and fire flags? Ancient Mariner, phosphorescence. 88 Which poem contains pantheistic idea? The Aeolian harp, unity with nature. 89 Which poem questions poetic inspiration? Dejection, an ode, loss of joy. 90 Who is Christabel's father? Sir Leoline, lord of the castle. 91 Which poem involves betrayal of hospitality? Christabel Geraldine's deception. 92 Which poem reflects religious doubt? Dejection, an ode, spiritual conflict. 93 Who guides the mariner home? Seraph band, symbolic spirits. 94 Which poem contains a delight comes sudden on my heart? Frost at midnight, sudden joy. 95 Which poem contrasts former joy with sorrow? Dejection, an ode, autobiographical pain. 96 Which poem is a romantic fragment? Kubla Khan, left incomplete. 97 Which poem uses color symbols green/white/gold? Christabel, symbolic palette. 98 Which line describes a seductive figure with lips red? Ancient Mariner, crew description, ballad motif. 99 Narrator of Ancient Mariner? The Mariner Confessor. 100 Which poem ends with he preth best who loveth best? Ancient Mariner, final moral.